How often do you find yourself in the middle of a chess game, and when it's your turn to move, you have no idea what to play? It happens to all of us. When there isn't a clear tactic or obvious move to play, we need to find a plan. Sometimes, plans can be complicated, long-term ideas, but more often they can be a simpler 2 to 3 move idea. In this position, with black to move, it isn't easy to find a move to play. Let's find a plan for black. Where do you notice the most tension in the position between the white and black pieces? Black has 2 pieces attacking the central pawn on d4, and white has 2 defenders. White's knight on f3 is an important piece. It protects the d4 pawn and also joins that pawn in putting pressure on the e5 square. Notice the knight on f3 isn't protected, and black's rook on f8 is x-raying the knight through the bishop on f6. Is there a discovered attack with the bishop? The bishop doesn't have a lot of moves available. There doesn't seem to be a good tactic. When you don't know what to do, one plan is to find your worst placed piece and try to improve it. One idea would be to play rook c8, moving the rook to a file that is not blocked by pawns, so it may open up soon. Notice the bishop on d7 is passive. It is guarding the weak e6 pawn, but other than that, it isn't very effective. Can you find a 2-move plan that improves the bishop and attacks the knight on f3? By asking that question, you may have found the strange-looking but powerful move, bishop e8. Black's plan is now clear. The bishop is going to move to h5 on the next move, improving one of black's less effective pieces and attacking one of white's most important pieces in the battle for the center, the knight on f3. After rook f to e1 and bishop h5, black attacks the knight, pinning it to the rook on d1. Black is now threatening to capture the knight and win the pawn on d4 by removing one of its key defenders. White responded to this threat by playing bishop e2, protecting the knight and clearing the d-file for white's queen and rook to help protect the d4 pawn. Now that the light-squared bishop has been improved, what should black do next? How can we continue with our plan to add more pressure to the d4 square? Can you improve a piece that isn't doing that much and add more pressure to the d4 target? If you felt the knight on e7 isn't very effective right now, great job! Black brings the knight into action and supports the plan to attack d4 with knight f5. Move by move, black is focused on improving pieces that weren't very effective and now has a comfortable position with all of the minor pieces working together to put pressure on the key d4 square. Black was able to convert this comfortable position into victory. Let's take a look at another example. In this position, both sides once again are fighting for control of the d4 square. White played the strange-looking move bishop d3, attacking black's bishop and also blocking the queen's protection of the d4 pawn. Before thinking about a plan, we have to check for tactics. Why can't black just win a pawn with knight takes d4? If we can't answer that question, we should accept our opponent's gift. Can you see white's trick? After knight takes d4, knight takes d4, queen takes d4. White has lured the queen to the d4 square, and now that it is unprotected, white wins the queen by using the discovered attack, bishop b5 check, checking black's king and revealing white's queen's attack on the black queen. Now that we understand that capturing the d4 pawn is a disaster for black, we need to come up with a plan. White's king is already committed to the king side, and black's king still has a choice. One plan is to play safely and capture white's bishop and then castle kingside. This would be a solid choice, but can we find a more active plan? All of black's minor pieces are developed, and black has developed the queen to an active square on d6. Can you think of a more aggressive way to bring black's king to safety and plan to attack white's kingside? That's right, black can castle queenside. Now that black has castled queenside, knight takes d4 is a threat because white's bishop can no longer check the black king. Did black's decision to castle queenside create a clear plan? When you castle on opposite sides of the board, both sides should try to attack as forcefully as possible against the enemy king. Notice black allows white to trade bishops and double black's pawns on the f-file because black welcomes another pawn into the attack to help open up lines against white's king. After knight e2, protecting the d4 pawn, How can black begin to set up threats against white's kingside and start an attack? If you found g5, great job. The h3 pawn is a hook in white's position that black will try to rip open to start an attack. White's pieces are not as actively developed and are not yet prepared to attack on the queen side. White should have played bishop takes f5 with the idea of moving the queen to d3, attacking the f5 pawn, trying to catch up on development, and slow down black's attack. But in the game, white played c3, adding more protection to the d4 pawn and preparing b4 to start a queenside attack. But black's attack crashes through first with g4, attacking the knight on f3 and the pawn on h3, so black will be able to open lines on the next move. By castling queenside, black forced both sides to focus on the plan of attacking on opposite wings. Since black's pieces were better developed and prepared for this plan, black was able to gain an advantage and later won the game. Let's take a look at one more example together. In this position, material is equal, and at first glance the position may look balanced. With white to move, white can force a trade of queens with queen d5 and enter a bishop and pawn ending. Notice black has 3 pawns that cannot move: a5, c5, and e5. All of these pawns are on dark squares, which restricts the activity of black's dark squared bishop, and these pawns are also fixed targets for white's dark squared bishop. White is blocking these pawns with pawns on a4, c4, and e4. Notice they are all on light squares, so black's bishop can never attack them. White's plan is simple: trade queens and use the king and bishop to attack black's weaknesses on the dark squares. After queen d5 check, queen takes d5. How should white recapture? If c takes d5, this allows black's pawn to advance with c4, opening up the dark squared bishop and allowing black some chances for activity. A much stronger move for white to play is e takes d5. White is now threatening to win a pawn with bishop e1, so black plays bishop d6. Black's bishop protects both the c5 and e5 pawns and is ready to move to c7 to guard the a5 pawn if needed. After trading queens, white's next step is to bring the king into the game and focus on a target. Which pawn can white's king add pressure against? That's right, the e5 pawn. After king f3, king f7, and king e4, white has centralized the king and is beginning to add pressure to the e5 pawn. After king f6, black is trying to hold the position together. In order to win a game of chess, you often need at least 2 weaknesses. White has pressure on e5 with the king. Can you find a plan that maneuvers the bishop to help attack e5 and attack a second weakness? If you realize that moving the bishop to c3 would attack both e5 and a5 at the same time, great job. After bishop e1, forcing bishop c7, with bishop c3, white now is attacking 2 weaknesses, the a5 and e5 pawns, at the same time. Notice black's bishop is stuck on c7 as it has to protect pawns on 2 diagonals. Black's king also can't move because white would simply win one of the weak pawns. Black can only wait by playing a move such as h6. White has played very well, but how do you win the game? If white can force the king or bishop to move, black will lose the e5 pawn. How can white make this happen? We need to make waiting moves as well, trying to run black out of moves. After h3, if black plays g5, white will run black out of moves with g4. After h5, white freezes black's kingside pawns with h4. Black is now out of waiting moves. If the bishop or king moves, one of black's pawns will fall. If black tries g5, white can win with h takes g5, forcing black's king to move and capture the e5 pawn. Can you find an even stronger move that takes advantage of black's overworked king? If you found the powerful bishop takes e5 check, great job. Black's overworked king cannot protect both the e5 and g5 squares, so after bishop takes e5, h takes g5 check, king takes g5, and king takes e5, white's passed d-pawn will win the game. Are you ready to put your plan into action? Prove it in the challenges.